Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In today's episode, we're going to create a simple fire dash effect using the Niagara system and a custom fire texture. But before we get started, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our episodes in the future. So let's go ahead and get started. To start with, let's start with our Niagara system. So right click, add a Niagara system, and this will be a new system. And just select an empty template, add that, and hit finish. Let's just name this fire dash for now. To begin with, let's go to properties. And we want to set this to GPU simulation. And we want this to be fixed. And inside this, we can set this to a pretty high number. This will let us spawn more particles than we would be able to with the CPU or if these were low. So we're kind of clamping it in between those bounds. The next thing, let's go ahead and add a spawn rate. And let's add this to, we'll put this at some high number. We'll go 5,000 for now, but we'll likely be increasing that and playing around with it to get it to fit what we want. In your particle spawn, let's do an initialize particle. Oh, I already had one. Don't need two. In the initialized particle, I'm going to do lifetime random and do something like that 0.1 to 0.5. We'll likely change these around depending on what it looks like. I also want to do a random sprite size. And again, we'll play with this depending on what it looks like. And this is some of the things that will change along the way. Go back to your particle spawn and let's add an initialize mesh reproduction sprite. This is going to be where we actually initialize the sprites on the mesh. So we want to go over to our user parameters and we want to add a skeletal mesh. And I'm just going to name this skeletal mesh. Drop down this and we need to add the mesh that we want to use right here. I'm using this third person here, and let's see what mesh is attached. This is the Quinn Simple for mine, but you want to put whatever your skeletal mesh is in here. I'm using Quinn Simple, so I'll set that. And then on this initialize mesh reproduction sprite, we want to drag the skeletal mesh into here. And then that's good for now. And now you can see that our sprites are initializing all over the surface of the skeletal mesh. One thing we can do is to see some movement already. We'll add a velocity here. And you can kind of see it moving. This adds a little bit of animation to it. We'll leave that alone for now and come back to it and change that quite a bit. If we go down to our particle update, we want to do an update mesh reproduction sprite. And the same thing here, we're going to drag our skeletal mesh in here. And then we want to turn off the override here. That allows our particles to move. And from here, we just want to start changing the look of our particles. So I'm going to start adding some stuff in here. I want to start with a scale sprite size. For this, I like to do some crazy things for the size. We want it to start super small. It's going to get big, kind of be around the same, and then kind of die off. This may not be what you want. So for now, let's actually just do a linear ramp up. You can click that and add it. So over time, the sprite will get bigger. Let's add let's change this velocity down to like a 5 here. And I like to affect that with gravity. So add a gravity force. And for this gravity force, I want to do a random range vector. And I'm going to have the gravity going upward, so a positive number in the z direction. And do something like this, 150 to 200. I'm also going to add a drag just to get some kind of natural looking behavior. And set this to like a 0.5. I'm also going to add a curl noise. This we can kind of play with as we go to see if we want more or less. If we go really high, we start seeing almost looking like the particles are dusting away, but I'm going to leave this down at 10 now, and we'll change that after we get it onto our character. I'm going to add a scale color and a color. For this color, I want to set it to a fire color, which would be, and I'm also going to kind of multiply it by 100 so that we can get some good, like emissive color, some brighter color to it. For the scale color, I want to do just on the alpha, we want this to get lighter, disappear over time. So I'm going to do a float from curve. And for this, I'm going to do, you can do kind of anything here, but you really want it to be 0 right around the end. So it looks like it's fading away. So you can do something like this ramp, or you can do a linear ramp. So for now, we'll leave it as the linear ramp down. And that's really all we want to do here for now. The next thing we want to do is go to our third person character. And on our mesh, we're going to add that Niagara system. And I'm just going to rename this to Fire Dash FX. And let's set it to our character. And that's the basics of it. Now it's applied to our character. If we save this and run it, doesn't quite look dashy. It's shooting particles all over. So one thing we can do to solve that is if you go into your solve forces and velocity, and let's give this a speed limit, and let's put this really low, maybe like 150. So now it's more of a dash and not just throwing the particles all over. The next thing we want to do is go into your this sprite material here. We want to change that out for something a little smokier, so it's not just circular sphere sprites. So let's go in here, and we want to create our own texture and then create a material from that. So if you open up 3D Paint or Paint or some sort of art program, we can create our own texture that we're going to use. We want this to be grayscale. On your canvas, go ahead and set it to, this could be anything. I want to do 1024 by 1024 just to keep it square. And then we want to set the background to black. And then from here, I like to grab the spray can for just a noise map like this. Turn the thickness up. And I'm going to start with just a light gray and just do some random noise. And then I'm going to grab the white and do some like brighter spots around. It doesn't have to be perfect. The more random, the cooler effects you can get. You can go back through and clear some areas out. Just trying to make this kind of look smoky. And once you get something like this, I'm not going to put too much time into making it perfect. We're going to go ahead and save that. And go ahead and close that down. And then I'm going to import that. And you can do that by importing or just dragging and dropping. The next thing we want to do now that we have a texture is create a material. So let's right click and add a material. And I'm going to call this dash trail. And inside this dash trail, we want to select your material output here. And under material in blend mode, we want to say translucent. And under shading model, we want to go unlit. This will let us use our emissive color and opacity. We're going to use a particle color and a texture sample. For this texture sample, you want to click that and we want to set it to our smoke 3 that I just created. And then we're also going to multiply this with a radial gradient. We're going to start, let's multiply our radial gradient with the red from our texture. And then we're going to multiply this again with the alpha channel of our particle, the particle color. This is going to be our opacity. So now you can kind of see the smoke in here. And then we want to take these two that are multiplied, and we're going to multiply these with the particle color. And this is going to go into emissive color. So there's what our smoke looks like. Off of your texture, we're going to grab UVs and let's do a panner. And I like this to go up. So if you do something like that, or maybe a little slower. From here, we're going to do text chords, and we're going to multiply this. And here we're going to give ourselves a dynamic parameter that we can use inside of our Niagara system. So come off here and say dynamic parameter. And this is going to affect our tiling. So we're going to call this tiling. And we'll change this inside of our Niagara system. We also want to come off of here. The reason we're using this, we're going to do if you hold one and click, you'll get a single float. And we want to change this density. You can kind of see it here. This we'll see work more in our actual Niagara system once we apply this and see what this number needs to be. So if we go back over to our Niagara system and your sprite renderer, we want to add that dash trail that we just created. And if you see, they're not just little circles anymore. They kind of have that whichever part of this UV that it's on right now kind of should be something in this area. We can change where it's being applied to, and these are numbers you might have to play with based on what yours is looking like. I'm just going to leave this here for now and go back into our Niagara system. In our Niagara system, we want to go into our particle update and we want to add that dynamic material parameter. And here we see the tiling that we set up. I like to set this to a random range float for this parameter. And we're just going to have this go between 0.1 and maybe 3 for now. These are also kind of small. They kind of look like little tiny explosions for now, but if we go to scale sprite size, and let's multiply this by another number, so now that kind of looks even more like little explosions. And another thing we can do now that we can come here and change our density and see what that looks like. Then let's go play it. And that kind of looks like a little fire. And now when you run, it comes off the back. You can change this a lot of ways. You can play inside here all you want. You can change the panning. Um, and then you can also, in the dynamic um, parameters here, you can always play around with this and see if any of that changes what you want it to look like. So that kind of looks like little flames. Again, sometimes you have to play with this chord here to try to find an area that gives you the look you want. So every material is going to be a little different on where that is, but that's kind of what we want it to look like. Some of the things you can do to change the looks of this, if you jump this number up a lot, you see it is a lot more spawns, a lot more little flames. So then if we go look at that, and you can see the outline of the character as you're running a little more. To make it more look more like flames, you might want to go change the way that it um, falls off on color, size, all kinds of things that you can really change to affect it here. And then increasing the curl noise. Makes it a little more look like embers. Increase the randomness of the life. So some make it farther up and some don't. Change your gravity around too. Um, Make it go even higher. And then over time, since it's affected by gravity, it just keeps rising. And let's see, increasing drag too might give you some effects that you want. There's more resistance to things being moved. So you might see that um, outline a little longer there. And if we turn that way up, let's turn that up even more. So those are some of the ways that you can kind of play around with this and get the look that you want. So that's going to do it for this episode. In this episode, we successfully created a simple fire dash effect using the Niagara system and a custom fire texture. Remember, this is just the beginning. It's just a starting off point, and there are tons of ways that you can customize this effect to fit your project. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons, and feel free to share your thoughts and questions in the comments section below, as well as any suggestions for other videos. I always am up for the challenge. As always, happy developing, and I'll see you in the next one.